The next hadith, number 29, hadith of Mu'adh ibn Jabal رضي الله عنه قال قلت يا رسول الله أخبرني بعمل يدخلني الجنة ويباعدني عن النار. Mu'adh ibn Jabal رضي الله عنه, he is, as we said that before, he is one of the scholars of the Sahaba رضي الله عنهم, and he comes in the Day of Judgment ahead of all of the scholars of the Ummah of the Prophet ﷺ by a ratwat hajar, by a distance of a stone being thrown, as the Prophet ﷺ praised him. And there are many hadith, whether, for example, the Prophet ﷺ said, Wallahi Mu'adh, I love you, inni uhibbuk, so do not leave after each salah to say, Allahumma inni ala dhikrika wa shukrika wa husna ibadatik. And because of the ilm of Mu'adh radiallahu anhu, you would see how the question of Mu'adh radiallahu anhu to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. People think that the more they have knowledge, the more complicated their questions would be. But rather see how the Mu'adh radiallahu anhu, he made it very clear and simple, and the entire Ummah of the Prophet ﷺ benefit from the answer of the Prophet ﷺ. He said, O Messenger of Allah, akhbirni, inform me, bi'amal, by an action, yudkhiluni al-jannah, to make me enter Jannah, wa yubaiduni an al-nar, and to make me far away from the hellfire. This is the entire deen, this is the entire concern, this is our entire life is about this. Why we study the deen, why do we learn the ayat of the Quran and the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ? It's because of this. Something that would make us enter Jannah and make us away from the hellfire. And when a person have the hope to enter Jannah, he would do the acts of people of Jannah. When a person fear the fire, he would run away from it by also actions. What does it mean to run away from the hellfire? By being away from sins, by doing the acts of obedience to Allah. And as Yahya ibn Mu'adh radiallahu anhu, he said, rahimahullah, miskin ibn Adam, he said, miskin, how sad or poor is the son of Adam. لو خاف النار كما يخاف الفقر دخل الجنة. If he fears the hellfire the same way that he fears poverty, he will enter the Jannah. And the same thing we can say, if people fear the hellfire the same way that we fear death and we fear sickness and diseases and viruses and things like this, people will enter Jannah. How people are taking all kinds of measures and precautions and things like this to protect themselves from something that if they don't get it now, meaning death, they will have it later. They will have it after a few years. Everybody shall return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But how they are so much strict with their own selves and with their families and so on, which is a good thing, which is part of our deen. And part of that is to remind us that we know how to react with regards to warnings and things like this. So nobody then is to say, I wasn't warned. When they are warned of something, they don't even see. Right? And the same thing with being warned of the hellfire and to have the hope of the hereafter and the Jannah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then he said, the Prophet said to him, لَقَدْ سَأَلْتَ عَنْ عَظِيمٍ وَإِنَّهُ لَيَسِيرٌ عَلَى مَنْ يَسَّرَهُ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى عَلَيْهِ. He said, you have asked about something azim, something great. This is a great thing what you asked about. This is the most important thing. وَإِنَّهُ لَيَسِيرٌ. And at the same time, since it's such a great thing, so that means, is it something difficult? No. وَإِنَّهُ لَيَسِيرٌ. Indeed, it's easy, yasir, simple, easy. عَلَى مَنْ يَسَّرَهُ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى عَلَيْهِ. For those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it easy for. So, and this is another lesson of matters of belief, matters of the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and not to think that to enter Jannah and to be saved from the hellfire, that this is a difficult thing. But most people are away from this. But it's not difficult, it's easy, but only with one condition. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for the person. And how can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then make it easy for the person? When the person is sincere, when he's truthful, when he's following the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what's in the hearts and who deserve and who does not deserve. Then he said to him the answer. تَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ لَا تُشْرِكُ بِهِ شَيْئًا. The first thing is تَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ. You worship Allah. لا تشرك به شيئا. You do not associate anything with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's, of course, the most important thing, the foundation of the deen. And how the Prophet ﷺ would always say it, and this is the way of the Quran, that the order to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the order also not to associate partners with Him. And it's not just to say, A'budillah, worship Allah, because to worship Allah, you have to do certain things and you have to be away from associating partners with Allah. So we have to learn how to worship Allah, the Tawheed of Allah, and we have to learn the shirk to avoid it. تَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ لَا تُشْرِكُ بِهِ شَيْئًا. And that's one of the subjects of how to stay away from such an evil thing, which is a shirk. وَتُقِيمُ الصَّلَاةِ. So this is the first pillar of Islam. وَتُقِيمُ الصَّلَاةِ, to establish the salah, the second pillar of Islam. And we talked about that before, and we know what tuqim is, not just to addi or to make the salah, but to establish it with one's heart, the khushu' in the heart, and the physical ihsan of goodness of praying like the Prophet ﷺ, and to perfect also our wudu, and to pray the salah on time and things like this. وَتُؤْتِ الزَّكَاءَ, and to give the zakah. And tu'ti zakah, it's always as an evidence that the zakah has to come out from the person, not to write it off from some debt, for example, that a person gave, but to give the zakah, and that has its rulings. And this is one of the pillars of Islam. وَتَصُومُ Ramadan, and to fast the month of Ramadan, which we're about to witness, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us witness the month of Ramadan. And subhanAllah, some people, they are dying before they reach the month of Ramadan. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us witness the month of Ramadan. So, وَتَصُومُ Ramadan. So, Siyam, the fasting of Ramadan, is an action that make people enter Jannah and make them away from the hellfire. And there are a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that talks about this. And there is a gate of Jannah called Ar-Rayyan for the fasting people. And there is the fasting takes a person away from the hellfire, and so on. وَتَحُجُّ الْبَيْتِ, and to make the Hajj of the Bayt, of the house of Allah in Mecca. And this is once in lifetime as a mandatory thing. ثُمَّ قال, then he said عليه الصلاة والسلام, and that's from the generosity of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام. He gave him the obligations, the pillars of Islam. Then he said to him, أَلَا أَدُلُّكَ عَلَى أَبْوَابِ الْخَيْرِ. أَلَا أَدُلُّكَ, giving him a question. Should I inform you? Should I guide you? أدلك from الدلالة, from the dalil, evidence. Should I inform you? Should I give you the way and show you the way? على أبواب الخير, to the gates of al-khayr. To the gates of al-khayr. أبواب الخير are the gates of the khayr. And then once you open the gate and you enter, then there's abundance of khayr and goodness there. And the Prophet ﷺ would say this, and it shows the zeal, the himma of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, that if you give him the keys, he knows that he is eager to know, so that he can gain as much as he can from al-khayr. Not as we sometimes try to convince ourselves to be patient and to do acts of worship and so on. So what are the keys of, or what are the gates of al-khayr? The Prophet ﷺ, he said, "As-sawmu junnah." As-sawmu junnah. And the question does not need an answer because it's an obvious one, right? Because the answer has to be yes, definitely. As-sawmu junnah, fasting is junnah. Junnah with a dhamma on the jim means shield, not jannah. Even though the word jannah has the same meaning to it, because the jannah or paradise, it's hidden from those who are outside of it, hidden by the trees and but by what's in it. So it has the same root meaning though. So Junnah means it's something that barrier between the person and something else, which means it prevents the person from all kinds of harm, to prevent them from the hellfire and in this life and in the hereafter, and protects them from sins and things like this. As-sawmu junnah. This is one of the things to reflect upon with regards to fasting. That since fasting, a person is abstaining, staying away from certain things, food and drink and relations and so on. That means that act of abstaining from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbidden the day when a person is fasting is meaning also that he is staying away by the will of Allah from the harm and from sins and from the hellfire. So as-sawmu junnah. and then he said عليه الصلاة والسلام والصدقة تطفئ الخطيئة كما يطفئ الماء النار. والصدقة, charity, تطفئ الخطيئة, it distinguishes the fire, it distinguishes the sin, الخطيئة, the sin, the same way كما يطفئ الماء النار, the same way as the water distinguishes the fire. So how the physical example is very clear, that when there's a fire and the fire burns and causes so much destruction and causes so much of loss of lives and wealth and so on, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created what puts off the fire. The same thing with the sins, but even worse. Sins ruins the person, destroys the person, is the reason for destruction of wealth and health and spread of evil things and bad things. And in the hereafter, it's the reason for people to enter the hellfire. All of that because of the sins. The sins are far worse than fire and death itself and all kinds of evil things. It's far worse than the pandemics and all of these things is to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what puts off the sin? As-sadaqah. So as-sadaqah, to give charity. And this is what the early generations of Islam, whenever they face difficulties, they would give charity because they know that this is because of the sins. So a way to expiate the sins is to give charity and to benefit the poor and the needy. And that's why also one of the things that are very stressed in these days is to give charity with one's health, wealth, whatever means, to be generous to others and to help others and so on. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, وَصَلَاةُ الرَّجُلِ فِي جَوْفِ اللَّيْلِ. One of the keys of, one of the gates of khair, the prayer of the man in the middle of the night. In the middle of the night prayer, especially in the middle of the night. And then he said, عليه الصلاة والسلام, ثم تلا, then he recited, تتجافى جنوبهم عن المضاجع يدعون ربهم خوفا وطمعا ومما رزقناهم ينفقون حتى بلغ يعملون. The Prophet ﷺ recited the ayah in Surah Al-Sajdah, that their sides forsake their beds out of the fear of Allah and hope for the rewards from Allah. وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ, and they spend from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides for them. فَلَا تَعْلَمُ نَفْسٌ مَا أُخْفِيَ لَهُم مِّن قُرَّةِ أَعْيُنٍ. Then no soul knows what Allah had hidden for them, the comfort of their eyes, جَزَاءً بِمَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ, as a recompense of what they used to do. The same way their deeds, which is the night prayer, was hidden because it's in the middle of the night, because the Prophet ﷺ said, جَوْفِ اللَّيْلِ, the middle of the night where most people are asleep, when their actions were hidden from the people and they were seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, the reward also is hidden, meaning that nobody can ever imagine it, the great reward that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prepared for them. So this is the gates of goodness. As-sawm, junnah, fasting is the shield. As-sadaqa, the charity, distinguishes and puts off the sin the same way the water distinguishes and puts off the fire. وَصَلَاةُ الرَّجُلِ فِي جَوْفِ اللَّيْلِ. It was said that صَلَاةُ الرَّجُلِ فِي جَوْفِ اللَّيْلِ, praying in the middle of the night, is ma'tuf. That means it's part of what the sadaqah or the reward of the sadaqah too. That means that the praying at night also puts off the sins, expiates the sins. One of the ways to expiate the sins is to stand up at night and to make the salah. And that's why even also the Salatul Layli in Ramadan, من قام رمضان إيمانا واحتسابا غفر له ما تقدم من ذنبه, as the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever prays the night prayer in Ramadan, his previous sins will be forgiven. And the same thing with fasting. So fasting and the night prayers have a great means for expiating of sins. And then the Prophet ﷺ, he said, ألا أخبرك برأس الأمر وعموده وذروة سنامه. Should I inform you of رأس الأمر, the head of the matter, the head of the matter. The head of the matter, as we would see the answer to it. The head of the matter is the thing that, the head of all things. That means this is the purpose of our life. This is what you're created for. وعموده, which the pillar of it, وذروة سنامه, and the highest level of it, like the sanam of the camel, the highest level of it. These three things: رأس الأمر, the head of the matter, the pillar of it, which is the most important thing in it, and the highest level of it. قلت بلى رسول الله. He said, yes, O Messenger of Allah. قال, he said, رأس الأمر الإسلام. رأس الأمر, the head of the matter is al-Islam. This is the matter that most important to one's self, more important than one's again life itself, or health and wealth and so on. Al-Islam, to be a Muslim, to perfect one's Islam, the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is Ra'sul Amr. Everything is because of the deen of Al-Islam that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose for the people to be upon. وَعَمُودُهُ الصَّلَةِ, and the pillar of it is as-salah. وَعَمُودُهُ as-salah. We know that buildings might have more than one pillar. But when it says وَعَمُودُهُ الصَّلَاةِ, we know that there are pillars of Islam. But when as-salah is mentioned as the amud, as the pillar of the matter of Islam, it's giving the example of the tent, where the tents, the conventional tent, if it's correct to say, the one that has a pillar in the middle of it. Right? Only one pillar in the middle, and you can put the curtains on the sides of it, and you put a peg at the end to make it as big as you want it to be. So it's only one pillar in the middle of the tent. And this is basically what one pillar, if the pillar is not there, there's no tent, right? Which is in different structures, you might have more than one pillar, and one pillar is lost. So the structure becomes weak, the building becomes weak, might fall after some time, but there are more than one pillar. But here, وَعَمُودُهُ الصَّلَاةِ, the significance of mentioning وَعَمُودُهُ الصَّلَاةِ, that means it's that pillar, that if it's lost, that matter does not exist. That issue, or which is basically al-Islam, it's not there anymore, as the example of the tent. And that's why the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they understood this. لا حظ لمن لا في الإسلام لمن لا صلاة له. As Umar radiallahu anhu said, there's no share of al-Islam for the one that does not make salah. He's not a Muslim, the one that intentionally leaves the salah, Jumu'ah and Jama'at and everything like this. So وَعَمُودُهُ الصَّلَاةِ, and what is meant by as-salah is the 5 daily salah. وَذِرْوَةُ سَنَامِهِ الْجِهَادِ. ذِرْوَةُ سَنَامِهِ, the head of the matter is al-jihad, as the same also example with the tent, the head of the highest level of it, the highest part of it, al-jihad fi sabilillah, to struggle to fight for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And with all the different levels of jihad, and especially like also when a person is, as we said, worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with what Allah decreed upon him, like in our situation where a person finds himself at home, no salatul tarawih in the masjid, things of that nature, not able to go make umrah and things like this. So whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it feasible for them, this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can give the person the best of the rewards if the people are sincere and truthful and so on. So the same thing with the different levels of jihad, there are certain levels of jihad that are feasible for the person to practice al-jihad, to struggle with oneself, which is akad furud al-jihad. The most obligatory jihad upon oneself is to struggle with oneself, to be obedient to Allah, to be steadfast on the deen of Allah. And as we said, that meaning that we have in ourselves, we are in constant war with ourselves. Ourself try to make us lazy, ourself try to make us follow our desires and sins, and you have to fight back against yourself. And that's the most important battle that a person goes through in his life. Either himself would defeat him, or he would defeat himself. So defeating oneself is to apply this hadith and the like of it. And no one is to expect that there's someone that the matter has been made so easy for him that he doesn't need to struggle with his own self. It does not exist. It's a battle that everybody has to face. And some people gain and some people lose. And that's why when we make the religion in such a way that everything is easy, meaning if if it bothers you, that music is haram, or there's differences of opinion. As some people, they try to make it, they think that when they say this, they're making people at ease with the religion so that they don't run away from it. No, we have to struggle with our own selves. You love music so much, leave it for the sake of Allah. It's not going to kill you if you leave it for the sake of Allah, especially that it's evil. It takes you away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It distorts your heart. It makes your heart filthy. It makes you not able to be obedient to Allah. Does not make you taste the sweetness of al-Iman. Yes, it doesn't make you a disbeliever if you listen to music. You're still a Muslim, but you're committing a sin. Struggle with yourself to leave it and once and for all, and be at ease with yourself. You suffer, be patient, seek rewards from Allah. The same thing with riba, the same thing with all kinds of sins, and one of which also the salah, and major things and minor things, and hijab and niqab and all these types of things. We just have to struggle with our own selves, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for those who struggle. وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Those who struggle in our path, we will guide them to our way. But one of the very dangerous things that is happening today, and it's been for some time, from even for people, and again, we don't question the sincerity, of course, as the ulama they mentioned, those who call people to the deen, but they compromise so much in their speech and in their actions, thinking that this is a way to our times of fitan, and people are running away from the deen, so we have to do something so that they come halfway, or things of that nature. But the danger of it is that people come to the fold of good deeds, for example, they make salah and things like this, but we approve sins for them. So when the sins are approved for them, right, either they go back to their original way, or they find, even from practicality, they would find emptiness in there's a need in the heart to be obedient to Allah. So they would find ways, if they love the religion, they would go to innovations in the deen, bid'ah, Sufism, all these types of things. Why? Because we already approved for them to pollute their hearts with disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and not being away, or not to be upon the way of the Prophet ﷺ and the early generations of Islam. So, وَذِرْوَةُ سَلَامِهِ الْجِهَادِ, and also the jihad against the hypocrites, and with one's tongue, with one's speech, with one's actions, and so on. Then he said, ثُمَّ قال أَلَا أُخْبِرُكَ بِمِلَاكِ ذَلِكَ كُلِّهِ. It's a beautiful hadith, as you see, that it covers everything. Prophet ﷺ said, should I inform you بِمِلَاكِ ذَلِكَ kulli? Should I inform you of milak from al-milk, to own all of this? Should I inform you of something that would get you to do all of what I've said? And when we're listening to this hadith, is like, how can I be upon all of this? How can you be upon all of what is mentioned? To be in charge of it, basically. Milak al-shay, meaning ma yamliku bih, what you own. That means you own that thing. You are in charge of it. It become easy for you. And what you can own all of what is mentioned. قُلْتُ بَلَى Rasulullah. He said, yes, O Messenger of Allah, how, inform me. So he said, فَأَخَذَ بِلِسَانِهِ. The Prophet ﷺ took his own tongue, and he held his own tongue. فأخذ بلسانه وقال كف عليك هذا. He said, كف عليك هذا. Kuf means كف عليك. That means control this for yourself. Al-kaf is to stay away from something, right? To stay away from something, this is al-kaf, right? So كف عليك هذا, this is the verb, it's an order. Protect yourself from this, meaning from your tongue. Do not let it loose. Do not let it just move and talk and say whatever it wants to say. So you have to control your tongue. And this is the original ruling for the tongue, is that you don't speak unless you know for sure that what you're saying is good. That means you have to have the knowledge of what you're about to say is good, then you speak. If you're in doubt, do not speak. If you know that this is not good, then do not speak. So the norm is that the person is quiet unless proven otherwise that it's a good thing, then he would speak. So كف عليك هذا. And how the Prophet ﷺ used that one word. كف عليك هذا means do not let loose your tongue, abstain, hold your tongue. قلت يا نبي الله. So, and he did not mention to protect your tongue from what? Of course, this has so much details to it, but that specific clear words makes it very clear that we have to learn what to stay away from and how to protect our tongue. Until we learn, then basically for a person to be silent till he learn, he should speak with knowledge, and if he doesn't have the knowledge, then he should be silent. كف عليك هذا. Then he said to the Prophet ﷺ, يا نبي الله, O Prophet of Allah, وَإِنَّ لَمُؤَاخَذُونَ بِمَا نَتَكَلَّمُ بِهِ. Are we mu'akhadun? Are we held accountable? And are we going to be seized by what we speak about or so? Are we going to be questioned? Are we going to be punished with what we say? And that's a question that many people, they think they do not count their words as part of their actions, where they're going to be questioned about it in the day of judgment. So the Prophet ﷺ said to him, فَقَالْ ثَكِلَتْكَ أُمُّكَ. ثَكِلَتْكَ أُمُّكَ literally means, may your mother lose you, O Mu'adh. Right? This is a word that the Arab, they say it to encourage the person to understand and to get a hold of a subject that is being mentioned. They don't mean by it the apparent meaning of it or the literal meaning of it, that his mother loses him, that as if it's a dua for him to die. But what's meant by it is to encourage the person to be conscious of what is being said, right? That the matter is a very serious one, right? So he said, because of his question, are we going to be questioned with what we say with our own tongue? So then the Prophet ﷺ said, ثَكِلَتْكَ أُمُّكَ وَهَلْ يَكُبُّ النَّاسَ فِي النَّارِ عَلَى وُجُوهِهِمْ أو قال على مناخرهم إلا حصائد ألسنتهم. Prophet ﷺ said, hell is a question. Is there anything that يَكُبُّ النَّاسِ is that make people fall? Al-Kabb is when you pour a cup of water on the ground. Is there anything that would make people fall into the fire? على وجوههم, on their faces first. أو قال على مناخرهم, or he said on their nose. إلا حصائد ألسنتهم, except what their tongues harvest. That means, is there anything that would make people enter the hellfire other than what they say in their speech? So how powerful this statement of the Prophet ﷺ, when the statement was mentioned in such a way, that means what? It means as if the statement is, that's basically what gets people into the hellfire, is what they say with their tongues. And what stays in the heart stays in the heart. But once it comes into the tongue, that means it's part of one actions. And a word, and that's why also this is in the meaning of that the righteous ones even, they might be more careful with their actions. They struggle with themselves so much and they make so much jihad against their actions, against their evil actions. And they would go a great deal of making, for example, going to the salah in the masjid 5 times a day and giving charity and all of it is mentioned even in the hadith. But then what they say with their tongue, they are so much at ease with it. They don't perform the same struggle with their own speech and tongue. So that what happens, they backbite others, they slander others, they do all kinds of evil things with their speech, and then they find themselves end up being in the hellfire. Because of what they did with their tongue, ruined all of these deeds because of the major sins that they will commit with their own tongues. And as you remember the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, when he passed by the grave of the two, and they were punished, and one of them was punished because of the namima, or the slander that he used to do in his life. And this hadith is reported by Imam Tirmidhi, وقال حديث حسن صحيح. It's a sound hadith, and it's one of the very comprehensive hadith. And what matters is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us to be upon it, and to learn it, and to have the understanding of it, and to be established in our hearts, and to never to leave it, and to be always reminded of it, and to live our life according to what the Prophet ﷺ said in these precise words to Mu'adh radiallahu anhu. I don't want to take too much of your time, but if we really give the hadith and the like of it its rights, we can talk about the entire deen of Islam. But what really matters is to apply this in our life, inshallah. Inshallah, by tomorrow, inshallah, we should know when is the time for the classes in Ramadan, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us all witness the month of Ramadan and make it blessed and the best Ramadan, inshallah. Barakallahu fikum. وجزاكم الله خيرا. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.